Hello everyone, and welcome back to History of the Future, the series where I design a universe for a tabletop RPG set in outer space, using real-world data of stars and exoplanets to influence the worlds in this fantasy setting. I hope you History of the Future fans are excited, as this entry is jam-packed with new lore. The Tau Ceti system, based on the real-life star of the same name, is also based loosely on the existing planets and planet candidates there, and in the lore of History of the Future is possibly the most important system beyond the solar system and maybe Alpha Centauri. I'm going to structure this video slightly differently to the other system surveys that I've done in the past. This time I'm going to go over the in-universe history first, followed by a brief synopsis of each of the planets that can be found here, and finally we'll get to the speed art section of the video where I will be drawing each of the 9 settlements here in the system. Before, I had drawn at least one painting for every major planet in the system. However, with there being 9, technically 10 planets, and each collectively supporting 12 moons, where 6 of these bodies are inhabited, I absolutely do not have the time or the resources to illustrate them all for you today. So, since we're awfully pressed for time to go over this honestly quite massive system when it comes to both its number of worlds and its contents, let's hop right into its history. Tau Ceti was first discovered in the year 2649 when explorers from Epsilon Eridani finished the construction of the FTL gate to the system. Immigration here was almost immediate, starting days after the discovery during the first weeks of January during the same year. It was so attractive to settlers not only because of its 10 planets that were mostly remarkably habitable compared to what humans had been exploring during the past decade, but also because one of these planets, the fourth in the system, was an Earth analog, promising a bright and clean slate for those who wanted to escape the near planet-wide metropolis that had formed on Earth. Not only did the super-Earth support a breathable temperate atmosphere, its surface was covered in its own native life. This planet would quickly be named Teratau. Terra due to its similarity to Earth, and Tau due to its location in the system. It took less than 6 years for Teratau to become almost fully built up, with the proper infrastructure to support a self-sustaining civilization, with the trade route between it and the Earth becoming one of the most trafficked to this day, and until this day being the second most inhabited system behind the solar system, as even though its most populated planet is only the 6th place for the highest in population, behind Earth, Arjun, Melunia, Orada, and Proxy, it can be seen that the multiple inhabited planets give this system a huge leg up. The Tau Ceti system, like stated before, is a quite massive system compared to many of the other systems in the USSE, and it is reminiscent of the solar system in many ways, having only one more planet than the later. Its 9 planets in order from distance to the star go as follows. Brillen is a highly volcanic super-Earth with an atmosphere of sulfur dioxide and carbon dioxide. Due to its size, tidal locking, and atmospheric composition, its average surface temperature and surface pressure usually clock in around 900 degrees Fahrenheit and 102 Earth atmospheres respectively. Double the distance away at 0.2 astronomical units is the small volcanic world of Phew. Phew's barren, atmosphereless surface perplexes scientists to this very day, as Phew's seismic activity causes a strong magnetosphere that rivals even that of Jupiter in the solar system, and therefore it should have a thick and oppressive atmosphere similar to Brillen. Due to its confusing lack of an atmosphere, scientists believe that this planet is simply the youngest in the system, and therefore has not had the same amount of time to accumulate an atmosphere. The third planet out from the star, at a little over half an astronomical unit, is the desert world Verla. With both the title as the smallest planet here in the system, and also the planet with the smallest axial tilt when compared to the others at less than half a degree, Verla's oppressively hot surface is relatively stable. Its equatorial regions host an inhospitable band of sandy dune seas that during the day can reach temperatures of up to 170 degrees Fahrenheit, while at the poles, the rockier region here supports both an average day temperature of 98 degrees Fahrenheit, but also water found miles under the planet's crust. The presence of water and silicate resources here led to the formation of a settlement that today is in decline and known as the Forsaken Outpost. The fourth and most famous planet in the system is the super-Earth Teratau. At about 0.3 times wider than the Earth and in an orbit just over 1.2 astronomical units, Teratau's diverse and lush surface supports its own native and complex life forms. Its breathable atmosphere and vast stable surface led to an early boom in immigration to the world, and in the modern day the famous Teratau is both the sixth most populated planet and the human side of the universe, and is also known for its abundance of both native life and imported off-world life. A relatively unique detail to this planet, as the importation of foreign life to planets that already have their own native life forms became illegal sometime after this point. Teratau has 2 moons slightly smaller than Earth's moon, but similarly barren, and they appear prominently in its sky. These are named after 2 of the most famous figures from Norse myth. Thori is named after Thor, and Lokiri is named after Loki. The 5th planet is the second most populous spot in the system, and that is Gleo. This ice-covered super-Earth is part of what was known as the Line of 11. This refers to its place as one of the original 11 terraformed planets after the successful terraformation of Mars. As such, its atmosphere is entirely breathable. Its equatorial region boasts a thin stretch of thawed lowlands where vegetation can grow for much of the year. And in that thin band can be found many non-native species that were introduced to this world both from Teratau and the northern portions of North America, Europe, and Asia back on Earth, as well as a few species from other similarly boreal worlds. Its single barren icy moon is similar size to Earth's moon, as well as similar in distance. It is named Ullur after the god of winter in Norse myth. Between the 5th and 6th planets is the only asteroid belt in the system known officially as the Jormungandr Belt, but more famously to tourists as the Serpent Belt. It is named after the Norse legend of the world serpent who encircles the Earth in Old Norse legends. Much of the system in its early days received names inspired by Norse myth, as I'm sure you could probably tell by now. On theme, the 6th and largest planet in the system is a Jupiter-sized gas giant named Odin, after the king of the gods, noting its parallel to Jupiter back in the solar system. Odin's composition is rather odd for a gas giant, as most of its hydrogen is in the highly compressed metallic hydrogen at its core, while up in a higher band of its atmosphere is a thin band where the pressures and composition make the air entirely breathable to humans. As such, the platform city has become the largest floating city in the known universe. Further out at over twice the distance of Odin is a set of near equal-sized planets that orbit each other. The larger, Skuld, is an ice world whose nitrogen-rich atmosphere forms an orange haze with proper temperatures and pressures for methane lakes to form. Its surface is much like Titan back in the solar system. Its slightly smaller planetary brother is Hati, a similar ice world that is completely lacking in atmosphere. Instead, its frozen surface sports long cracks where water seeps out in geysers that conceal its subsurface ocean below. The second to last planet in the system is the second gas giant in the system, Doma. Its freezing temperatures and low light that it receives from its sun keeps the population in the planet relatively low. However, this traditionally composed gas giant supports a hydrogen fuel mining-based economy, like the myriad other platform cities across the universe. Doma has 3 unremarkable moons, Lulon, Daimon, and Trilla. The final planet in the system is the violet-hued ice giant Tau Ceti. Similar to Neptune back in the solar system, the last planet in the system sports no attractive resources and high winds. Keeping settlers away, its icy rings appear to have been formed when 2 moons that it was theorized to have once had collided with each other. This is supposedly because the moons were orbiting in opposite directions. These 9, technically 10 planets, and 12 moons are what makes up the famous Tau Ceti system, and of them a whopping 7 are inhabited. Here are the settlements amidst them that are large enough to support their own spaceport. Going in order from distance to the Sun yet again, the planet Verla has a single city near its north pole. Built on a rocky outcropping, the city was once a bustling oasis in the desert. Hot but attractive in the early days of space travel compared to the limited options that people had at the time, the poles of Verla, with access to water way underground and with an abundance of rare earth metals under its crust, seemed like a perfect place for those blue-collar workers who preferred warm desert living. In the centuries since, Verla's outpost population has been steadily in decline, being only 9% of its peak population in the modern day. Much of Verla Outpost, now renamed to the Forsaken Outpost, is a ghost town. Of the few regions of the city that are still inhabited, much of the population lives in relative poverty, as many of those who find themselves here on this financially unstable world are unable to move off of world for financial reasons. Moving from this dreary desert world to the crown jewel of the system Teratau, there are hundreds, if not thousands, of settlements here on this planet, ranging from wide metropolises to small village communities of farmsteads. 3 of these cities support their own regional spaceports: Alister's Landing, Heimsalvik, and Barcelona. Alister's Landing is the most heavily populated point in the entire star system, as well as the first recorded settlement on the planet. Named after its founder, the pilot and political figure Alister Magnusson, who was an important person during the 27th century. Boasting the largest space station on the planet, it is the most common initial destination for interstellar flights from tourists. Built in a mostly enclosed bay on the continent Unate, its old world architecture resembles most that of European and North American cities back on Earth. It acts not only as a main hub of commerce and trade on the planet, having both the largest and cheapest to import to spaceport on the planet, but also it's widely considered to be the cultural center of Teratau. Nestled between the snow-capped mountains and wide windswept tundras to the northwest, and the sea to the southeast, it is the most common image of the world that appears in the minds of 31st century people when they think about Teratau. The less populated but possibly more important city is Heimsalvik, the official government capital of the planet. Built in the shadow of a massive south-facing cliff, it is maybe the most naturalistic-looking and Earth-reminiscent city on the world. This is because of the invasive fir trees and pine forests on the planet that appear to, from above, be weaved throughout the city like a quilt, between swaths of affordable and simplified buildings. Home to the world's local senate and the homeworld residence of the serving representative, when they're not off the world, and most of the official offices that you might need to find in a government city. The city is also home to the Natural History Museum of the USSE, as well as HIPS University, which stands for Heimsalvik's Institute of Political Sciences, and it is the alma mater of many serving government officials to this day. If you lived in the 31st century and had the means, and your child had high political goals, this is where you would send them, or transversely attend yourself if you really had the means to. New Barcelona, named for its Mediterranean feel, is the most modern of the 3 spaceport cities. Built on the equatorial continent of Sind, it is set between a vast oceanic strait, which its northern-facing bay looks down upon, and whose shallow waters support subtropical reef systems similar to those found on Earth, and to its south is a high desert of simple and tough life forms. New Barcelona, population-wise, is smack dab between Heimsalvik's and Alister's Landings, and being only 3,000 miles from the later mentioned city, is only a 15-minute subway ride away. Though New Barcelona does have its own spaceport, it is the smallest by far on the planet, so most travelers from outside of the system travel to Alister's Landing first, as the NBSP mostly flies locally to settlements inside of the system, rarely seeing any interstellar flights. On the terraform world of Gleo, there are also many communities, probably somewhere between 300 and 500 distinct ones, but few of them, except for one, can actually be considered a city. The city of Vik is named after the Icelandic word for bay. It was named as such as it was built in a wide basin that was theorized to have once been an ancient lake or ocean that may have once existed on the planet. Vik itself is a medium-sized city with simple, hardy architecture. Its economy is supported by 2 main draws. The first is it is the home of the system's main military base and training academy, and the second is that the massive tech company Teratau calls this city their home. Due to the thriving economy and military-related history here, this planet finds itself another huge target of tourism in the system, this being its 3rd supporting industry. Although not as popular as Teratau by any stretch of the imagination, the cooler and more city-focused attractions here lead to a sizable portion of seasoned travelers making Gleo their destination. For the 38% of the population that doesn't live here in the city, most of these people find themselves on the hardy and picturesque homesteads away from the city. For many, a simple and attractive lifestyle, away from the hustle and bustle that comes in living in the planets in the core, while also not being too far from the amenities common in the USSE. Skipping over the largely temporary bases built in the asteroids and dwarf planets of the Serpent Belt, we arrive in the massive Odin planetary system. Alongside Odin, here is a system that sports 6 moons, each of them named after one of the realms of Norse myth. Muspelheim, the closest moon being a slightly volcanic world, is followed closely by the cloudy world of Niflheim. It is also a relatively volcanic world whose thick, churning atmosphere of water vapor and sulfur cooks up enough static electricity for near 24/7 thunderstorms. Midguard, the third moon, is a stable and mostly flat ice moon, who is the only one of the moons to have a settlement on it. Jotunheim is the largest of the moons and therefore named after the realm of the giants. Its surface is covered in towering mountains of rock and ice. Hela is named after the Norse world of the dead and has a relatively unremarkable surface, while the last moon, Nidavellir, is named after the home of the dwarves in Norse legend, as it is the smallest of the 6 moons. Moving down to Odin itself, its platform city, named Asgard after the realm of the gods, is the largest of the platform cities in the USSE. Initially supported solely by the gas mining that started the platform, the USSE bought the city from Millennium SFP, known at the time as Sorheim Mining Company, at the end of the 29th century. This led to the growth of the platform as multiple large companies were able to thrive there, including Gomi Distributors, an interstellar food production and distribution company, the Exocom company, which is the company that is responsible for using the FTL gates to link most star systems' information infrastructure together so that there is nearly zero delay in internet communications across the universe, as well as finally the luxury starship manufacturer Farragoni & More, which finds their main office here in the city. The city here is famous for its New Age architecture and brilliant buildings, interlaced with elevated gardens and parks. Even though the ambient temperature of the outside of the city rarely gets above 50 degrees, the city does see a lot of green due to a local attempt to introduce more naturalistic settings into the city. One, to aid the mental health of the people living there, but also to provide some local food production, aiding in the city's self-sufficiency. Not going far in the grand scheme of things, we find ourselves in the city built on the moon Midguard, New Oslo. This world of ice and snow has a thin, almost imperceptible atmosphere of pure oxygen that is about 1,000 times thinner than the atmosphere on Earth. With architecture similar to that found at the bases of the South Pole on Earth, its economy is mostly supported by being a secondary spaceport for the companies on Asgard below. It is a cold and mostly unforgiving place that somehow many of its blue-collar inhabitants love, as the community here appears to be quite close-knit. New Oslo has the smallest population in the system of only 67,000 people. The dark and cold surface of Skuld appears at first to be the least likely place for an economically stable settlement to pop up. However, its industry of methane mining gives it an irreplaceable spot in the terraforming industry. Life on this planet is hard but rewarding, as this dangerous job of methane mining leaves much of the population coming home cold and smelly. As such, it is actually culturally standard here to have your shower in the semi-separate section of your house that doubles as the entrance. Even though the work here is grueling and unrewarding emotionally, the pay, mostly due to how hazardous it can be, is extremely high. Due to this, most people spend a decade or two working here on the world just to move off to a tropical paradise like the planet Vol, or Caspian's planet, where they coast on their earnings for the rest of their retirement. The only city in the planet is a densely populated region right outside of the 10 most popular mines on the planet, most of which are connected by an intricate subway system. The city's name, MAREMO, comes as an abbreviation of the name Methane and Rare Earth Metals Outpost. The final destination in this video is the platform city of Doma, on the gas giant Doma. Doma, named after its domed subdivisions, is a much less interesting place to live when compared to Asgard. Doma's non-gas related industry is mostly in support of the workers who operate the mines here, with local bars, restaurants, schools, and shops. It is a relatively unpopular place for tourists. This is not to say that Doma is an unpleasant place to live by any means, as most of the apartments and condominiums on the platform are known for not only being cozy and comfortable, often with beautiful views of the city and skies of Doma alike, but also for being relatively inexpensive for both renters and homeowners. And with that, we wrap up the story of the Tau Ceti system, and that will be the final system in the core worlds. Like in real life, how countries are subdivided into smaller regions for ease of navigation, so too in the universe of History of the Future are there subdivisions of the empires found here. The 8 systems that have been detailed so far are the systems of the core worlds of the USSE. Even though we have now discovered all there is in the core worlds, we haven't yet come to the end of this chapter of History of the Future. No, before we move out into other regions of the USSE and then the galaxy at large, we have a few more entries that take place here. The next will be focusing on Teratau, again developing even more aliens for the planet like the last video did, as I feel like creating a more diverse cast of creatures would add to the realism of the planet and make it feel more alive. Beyond that, I still have to talk about what it's like to live on these worlds, the interstellar travel between them, and talk about the starship manufacturers that are found in this portion of the galaxy. All of these subjects will, of course, have their own videos, so that I can give them the proper attention that they need. So we have quite a few more entries left before we move on. Even though we're nearly at the end of this first chapter of History of the Future, we have almost countless others on our way to a fully fleshed out sci-fi universe. So strap in, folks. We still have a long way to go. I'll see you back on Teratau for the next entry in the series about this very special star system. And as always, if you liked this video, then leave a like. And if you want to see more like it, then subscribe. And turn on the bell to get notified when I upload next.